How did your twin ruin your life? You need to fail all your classes this semester so I look like the smart sister. For college applications, my older sister said, barging into my room with my report card she'd stolen from the mail. I'm not having you graduate with a higher GPA than me. I felt my stomach drop. I'd worked so hard for those grades, staying up until 3 in the morning every night perfecting my essays. I'm not tanking my grades because you got a C in AP biology, I said. I've been the smart one for our entire lives and you're not changing that now, she said, ripping pages out of my calculus notebook. Either you fail your finals or I'm telling our parents you cheated on everything. That's insane, I said. Mom and Dad already think you're only doing well because your teachers like you better, she said. If you don't start failing on your own, I'll make sure you fail anyway. 2 weeks later, she filed a formal complaint with the principal, claiming I was cheating off her old assignments since she'd taken the same classes last year. She told the administration I'd stolen her notes and was copying her work, demanding they investigate my grades and retroactively failed me for academic dishonesty. She'd actually rewritten her old assignments to match mine after breaking into my Google Drive, then submitted them as evidence that I'd plagiarized her. The Honor Council spent 3 hours reviewing her claim. Thankfully, they determined she'd fabricated the evidence, but instead of admitting it, she stood up and accused them of favoritism because I was 12 minutes younger and teachers felt sorry for me. She then contacted every teacher I'd ever had, claiming I'd cheated in their classes too, trying to get them to retroactively change my grades. After months of failed attempts, she showed up during my AP chemistry final with what she claimed was proof I'd been buying test answers online. She'd created fake screenshots of me purchasing exam keys and stood outside the classroom with printed copies telling everyone in line that I was a cheater who'd bought my grades. She actually grabbed my test when I turned it in and tried to eat it, so I'd get a 0, shoving the entire packet in her mouth while the teacher called security. They dragged her out, still chewing paper, and she swallowed 3 pages before they could stop her, giving herself severe intestinal blockage from the ink and paper. The night before my calculus final, she broke into the school to steal the exam and release the answers publicly so everyone's test would be invalidated. She'd learned the janitor's schedule and brought tools to break into the teacher's locked filing cabinet. But she was so manic from staying awake for 4 days planning this that she wasn't thinking clearly. She tried to pry open the cabinet with a crowbar, but it slipped and hit her leg, and she kept working even though she was limping, because she was so determined to ruin my final. She found the exams and started carrying all 200 copies to the copy room, but tripped on the stairs in the dark. She tumbled down 2 flights still, clutching the papers, and heard something crack, but she kept crawling toward the copy room, dragging her leg behind her. She made it there and started scanning exams, but she was so dizzy she knocked over the industrial printer trying to study herself. It fell and pinned her to the floor, but she kept trying to email the scan test to everyone in our grade. Even while trapped under, she managed to send 3 emails before her phone died, then tried to wiggle out from under the printer, but she couldn't move her legs. The janitor found her 9 hours later, still trapped, and the doctor said she'd damaged her spine so badly from trying to move the machine that she was paralyzed from the waist down. You made me destroy my body because you wouldn't just fail your classes, she told me from the ICU where she was learning she'd never walk again. I'm in a wheelchair forever because you had to be the smart one. My chest felt hollow hearing her blame me, but I still said, you broke into school to steal exams and got crushed by a printer. Your sister is paralyzed because you couldn't let her have this one thing, our mom said while my sister sobbed in her hospital bed. I passed all my finals with perfect scores but felt sick every time I looked at my grades, knowing my sister would never walk again. My parents made me skip my own awards ceremony where I was supposed to receive valedictorian to sit at her hospital bed during her 5th surgery. They posted constantly about her tragic accident, never mentioning she'd been trying to sabotage my finals, and everyone commented that she was so brave. Our relatives called me selfish for still caring about my grades while my sister was paralyzed, and my guidance counselor suggested I defer my college acceptance because the other students were uncomfortable with what happened. The next morning, I walked into the guidance counselor's office and she was already sitting behind her desk with her phone face up showing notification after notification popping up. She gestured for me to sit down while scrolling through what looked like dozens of emails, her face getting tighter with Each one she read. These are all from parents whose kids are going to state next year, she said without looking up from her screen. They're concerned about you being on campus with their children after what happened with your sister. She finally put the phone down and folded her hands on the desk, giving me that look adults give when they're about to suggest something for your own good. That's actually for everyone else's comfort. I think deferring your acceptance for a year would be best for everyone involved. My stomach twisted, but I kept my face still while she explained how a gap year would let things calm down and give my family time to adjust to my sister's new reality. I'm not deferring, I told her, and she let out this long sigh like I was being difficult on purpose. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a form, sliding it across to me with a pen. Then, you'll need to sign this liability release stating the school isn't responsible for any incidents that arise from your family situation affecting your college experience. I picked up the paper and read through all the legal language, basically saying if anyone harassed me or if my sister showed up on campus or if anything happened related to this situation, I couldn't blame the school. My hand was steady as I signed it and slid it back to her, and she looked surprised that I didn't argue. When I got home, the dining room looked completely different, with a hospital bed where our table used to be and one of those rolling medical carts next to it. Mom was arranging pill bottles and medical supplies on the cart while talking on the phone with someone about delivery schedules for medical equipment. She hung up when she saw me and pulled out a printed schedule from under a stack of papers, holding it out to me with this expectant look. I've worked out the care schedule for when your sister comes home next week, she said, pointing to all the highlighted blocks with my name on them. You'll need to be here for her morning routine, before school, and then straight home for afternoon therapy instead of going to that college orientation. I looked at the schedule and saw she'd blocked out my entire summer with caregiving shifts, including the week I was supposed to move into my dorm. I didn't take the paper from her hand, just walked past her to Dad's home office to look for my financial aid paperwork I needed to submit. His desk was covered in medical bills and insurance forms, and when I moved a stack to look underneath, I found my college acceptance letter with selfish written across it in red marker. The handwriting was definitely my sister's, even though she'd been telling everyone her hands were too weak to hold a pen since the accident. I took a picture of it with my phone and put the letter in my backpack, then noticed Dad standing in the doorway watching me. Your mom's right about staying home, he said, but I just walked past him too. The next day, the principal called and asked me to come in for a meeting about managing the narrative around what happened. I sat in his office while he talked about the school's reputation and how the media was starting to pick up the story because someone had leaked details about the break-in. He pushed another form across his desk, this one saying, I agreed the school had adequate security and wasn't negligent in any way that contributed to my sister's injury. We need to present a united front, he said while I read through it. The school board is concerned about liability issues, right? Then my AP chemistry teacher knocked and came in without waiting for an answer, walking straight to his desk and placing a sealed envelope on it. She looked at me and gave me this small nod, like she was trying to tell me something, then left without saying anything. The principal opened the envelope and his face went red as he read whatever she'd written. Then he folded it up and put it in his desk drawer. Sign the form and we can move forward, he said, but his voice was different now, less confident. I signed it because I wanted to leave, and as I walked out, I saw 3 other teachers standing in the hallway watching me go. 2 days later, an official letter came from the Honor Council with their seal on it, stating they'd found no evidence of academic dishonesty in any of my work, and confirming my grades were earned legitimately. The principal called within an hour of it being delivered, asking if I could come back in to discuss the letter. This time he seemed nervous, tapping his pen on his desk while he talked. Publishing this letter might inflame tensions in the community, he said. Your sister is dealing with enough without people taking sides on this issue. He suggested I keep the letter private for my sister's sake, but I could tell he was really worried about the school looking bad for not catching her false accusations sooner. That night, I was doing homework when my phone started blowing up with notifications from social media. My sister had posted a picture of herself in her hospital bed with machines around her and a caption about learning to forgive the person who put her there. She never used my name, but everyone knew who she meant, and the comments were filling up with people calling me heartless and selfish and saying I should be ashamed. Some people I'd never even met were sharing it and adding their own comments about how awful I was for not supporting my paralyzed sister. My phone rang and it was my aunt saying I needed to give my college money to my sister for medical bills since I was the reason she was hurt. Before I could respond, she hung up and my uncle called, saying the same thing. Then my mom's cousin called too, all within the same hour, like they'd coordinated it. They all said it was the least I could do, since she'd never walk again, because I had to be competitive and couldn't just let her have this one thing. I went to my room and pulled out an empty notebook from my desk, starting to write down everything that was happening with dates and times and exact quotes. My hands shook as I wrote about the meeting with the principal and the liability forms, and the social media posts and the phone calls from relatives. I documented the letter with selfish written on it and took pictures of all the forms I'd signed in the honor council letter. I wrote down every accusation and every meeting and every conversation, filling page after page with evidence of what was really happening versus the story everyone was telling. I needed this record because I could see how the narrative was shaped to make me the villain who destroyed my sister's life by being too competitive, and nobody wanted to remember that she broke into school to steal exams and got herself crushed by a printer she knocked over while committing a crime. The next morning my phone buzzed with an email from the guidance counselor, and I opened it expecting more pressure to defer college, but instead found links to family therapy resources with a note at the bottom saying she was required by law to report concerning family dynamics to authorities if she became aware of them. I stared at that last line for a long time, realizing she might actually be trying to help me in the only way she could without getting herself in trouble. I saved the email to a folder I'd started called Evidence and went downstairs to get breakfast when I heard Dad in my room going through my desk drawers. I ran back up and found him, holding my documentation notebook, flipping through the pages where I'd written everything down with dates and times and exact quotes. His face was red, and his hands were shaking as he turned to me and said I was making things worse by keeping records instead of focusing on helping my sister heal. He ripped out the pages about the principal's meeting and the liability forms, crumpling them into a ball and throwing them in the trash while telling me that if I really cared about family, I'd stop thinking about protecting myself. I grabbed the crumpled pages from the trash when he left and smoothed them out, taking photos of each one with my phone before hiding them in my car under the spare tire. 3 days later, my college sent an email with the subject line, urgent, response required, and my stomach dropped as I read that they'd received concerning messages from community members about my character and needed my response within a week or they'd have to review my admission status. I spent the next 2 days drafting a response that was just facts with no emotions or accusations, including the honor council clearance letter, the exact timeline of events from the school's own security footage, and the police report number 4, the break-in. I attached screenshots of the honor council's official statement and the principal's letter confirming I'd been cleared of all academic dishonesty allegations, making sure everything could be verified independently without relying on my word alone. The same day I sent my response, one of my sister's friends started a GoFundMe for her medical bills with a description that said the family was struggling because some members were refusing to help financially even though they could. Within 2 days it had raised $30,000 and been shared over 1,000 times on Facebook with comments calling me heartless for abandoning my disabled sister when she needed support. Most requested reads is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. People I'd never met were donating hundreds of dollars and writing messages about how brave my sister was and how some people only care about themselves. A week later, the police called asking me to come in for a follow-up interview about the break-in because they'd found evidence on my sister's laptop showing she'd been researching how to break into the school and disable security cameras for weeks before the incident. The detective showed me screenshots of her search history, including janitor schedule, high school, how to pick filing cabinet lock, and can stolen test answers invalidate everyone's exam, all dated 3 weeks before she actually broke in. I gave my statement, sticking only to facts I witnessed or could prove, like seeing her leave the house that night with a backpack full of tools and finding her car parked behind the school the next morning. The detective mentioned that breaking and entering with intent to Commit fraud was a felony charge that carried serious jail time, even if the person was injured during the crime. 2 days after my police interview, my parents hired a lawyer who called me that afternoon, asking if I'd sign a statement saying I didn't want to press charges against my sister, as if I had somehow initiated the criminal investigation myself. I told him I never pressed charges, and the school filed the police report for the break-in, but he kept pushing, saying it would help if I signed something supporting my sister. The next week we all had to meet with a hospital social worker to discuss long-term care plans for when my sister came home, and she kept asking me directly about my college plans while my parents kept interrupting to say I was reconsidering. The social worker wrote notes every time they spoke for me, and asked me again if I wanted to share my own plans, looking at me like she understood exactly what was happening. After the meeting, she handed me a business card for another social worker who specialized in family dynamics, and whispered that I should call if I needed someone to talk to. That night, I got an email from my AP chemistry teacher with contact information for a legal aid group that helped students dealing with family pressure around education, and she wrote that she'd seen this before, and I wasn't alone. She included the phone number for a lawyer who worked pro bono for students whose families were trying to prevent them from attending college, and said she'd already spoken to him about my situation if I wanted to reach out. I called the number the next morning and set up a meeting for that afternoon at a small office downtown, where the lawyer worked with students dealing with family issues around college. She had gray hair pulled back in a bun and glasses on a chain around her neck, and she listened while I explained everything that had happened, from my sister breaking into school to my parents demanding I defer college. She took notes on a yellow legal pad and asked me specific questions about dates and times and whether I had any written proof of what my sister had done. I showed her my documentation notebook with every email and text message printed out, and she nodded while flipping through the pages. She explained that legally my parents couldn't force me to stay home or prevent me from using my own financial aid for college since I was 18, and the money was in my name. She said family guilt was a powerful tool, but it didn't override my legal rights to pursue my education and make my own choices about my future. She gave me pamphlets about establishing financial independence and protecting myself from family members trying to access my college funds, and told me to keep documenting everything. 2 days later, I got a thick envelope from the scholarship committee for my merit award asking me to verify my enrollment plans for fall semester. The letter mentioned they'd received several concerning messages from community members about my character and family situation, but they noted that academic achievement and character were separate from family circumstances. They needed a response within 10 days confirming whether I planned to use the scholarship or if I wanted to defer it to help with family obligations. I spent 3 hours writing my response confirming that I would absolutely be enrolling in fall, and included a copy of the Honor Council's letter clearing me of all cheating allegations. I also wrote that I planned to use my education to better support my family in the long term through a stable career, which was technically true, even if it wasn't the kind of support my parents wanted right now. I mailed it certified with a return receipt requested so I'd have proof they received it. The next week I went to visit my sister at the hospital, and her physical therapist asked if she could talk to me privately in the hallway. She closed the door to my sister's room and looked around to make sure no one was listening before telling me she'd noticed my sister had more mobility in her legs than she was showing our parents. She said during therapy sessions, when she thought no one was watching closely, my sister would move her legs to adjust her position in bed, and had even pushed against the footboard during exercises. The therapist said she couldn't officially report it without more evidence, but she thought I should know since my family kept talking about permanent paralysis and lifetime care needs. I thanked her and wrote everything down in my car, including the date and time and what exactly she'd said, but I knew confronting anyone would just make me look like I was trying to minimize my sister's injury. 3 days later, the principal's secretary called saying I could pick up a letter he'd written about my academic record. When I got to the school, she handed me an envelope with just 2 sentences on the school letterhead stating that I had been cleared of all academic dishonesty allegations by the Honor Council and remained in good standing. It was the absolute minimum he could write, but at least it was official documentation I could use if anyone questioned my integrity. I made 10 copies and kept the original in a folder with all my other important documents. 2 weeks before graduation, the guidance counselor called me into her office and said the administration had decided I wouldn't be walking at the ceremony because my presence might upset other families. Given the circumstances, she said they could mail my diploma and valedictorian certificate to avoid any confrontation at what should be a celebration for everyone else. I sat there staring at her while she explained that several parents had complained about me participating, avoid drama. That afternoon, my AP chemistry teacher found out about the decision and she was furious. She got 3 other teachers who'd had me in their classes and they wrote a formal petition to the school board arguing that punishing an innocent student for family drama set a terrible precedent. They said I'd earned the right to walk at graduation through 4 years of hard work and perfect grades, and taking that away because of something I didn't even do was fundamentally unfair. The school board held an emergency meeting 3 days later and voted 4-3 to let me walk at graduation, but with conditions. I would be seated separately from the other honor students in a back row and wouldn't be recognized as valedictorian during the ceremony, even though I'd earned it. It was humiliating, but at least I'd have that moment of walking across the stage to get my diploma after everything I'd worked for. When I told my parents about graduation, they immediately said they wouldn't attend if I insisted on going. Mom said they'd already committed to being at the hospital that day for one of my sister's procedures that had conveniently been scheduled for the exact same time as graduation, even though it wasn't urgent. Dad said if I cared about family, I'd skip graduation to be with my sister during her medical treatment, instead of making everything about myself again. The next morning, my phone started blowing up with notifications from our town's Facebook group. Someone had posted a video from my AP chemistry final with the caption, "Is this really what happened?" And I clicked on it to see shaky phone footage of my sister shoving my test paper into her mouth while the teacher yelled for security. The video showed her cramming page after page between her teeth while students backed away from her, and you could hear someone saying, "What is wrong with her?" as she chewed frantically on my answers. Within 2 hours the video had 300 comments with people arguing about whether she'd been having a breakdown or deliberately trying to sabotage me. Some parents defended her, saying the pressure of senior year made kids do crazy things, but others pointed out that eating someone's test wasn't a normal stress response. My sister posted from her hospital bed an hour later, claiming the video was edited and taken out of context. She said she'd been having a panic attack that I should have recognized as her sister and helped her through instead of letting security drag her away. Her post got even more shares than the video, with people calling me heartless for not defending her mental health struggles. The morning of graduation, I put on my cap and gown, alone in the living room since my parents had already left for the hospital. I drove myself to the school and parked in the back lot where I wouldn't have to walk past any families taking photos together. The other honor students were seated in the front row, but they'd put my chair off to the side, near the emergency exit. When they called my name to walk across the stage, the auditorium went quiet for a second, before my AP chemistry teacher stood up and started clapping. About half the audience joined her standing ovation, while the other half stayed seated and silent. The principal handed me my diploma and valedictorian certificate without making eye contact, and the photographer didn't even take my picture like he did for everyone else. The salutatorian gave a speech about overcoming adversity and staying strong when people doubt you, and everyone knew she was talking about me even though she never said my name. After the ceremony, I walked to my car trying not to look at all the families celebrating together. There was an envelope tucked under my windshield wiper with my name written on it in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was $2,000 in cash and a note that said, "From teachers who believe in you and want to help you start your future." I sat in my driver's seat and cried for 20 minutes while families streamed past my car. That afternoon, my college sent an email confirming my acceptance was still valid despite the concerning communications they'd received about my character. They mentioned they were aware of my family situation and had assigned me a single dorm room to avoid any roommate complications. They also included information about free counseling services available to students dealing with family trauma. I used the money from the teachers to order everything I needed for my dorm room online and had It shipped to a friend's house so my parents wouldn't see the packages. I bought sheets and a comforter and desk, supplies and even a small coffee maker, paying with the cash at different stores. So there wouldn't be a trail. 3 weeks before I was supposed to leave for college, my parents brought my sister home from the hospital in her new wheelchair. They'd completely rearranged the house while I was at a friend's place for the afternoon, turning my bedroom into a physical therapy room with exercise equipment and medical supplies. Mom showed me the massage table where my bed used to be and said they needed the space for my sister's recovery. My clothes had been moved to boxes in the garage and my desk was gone completely. That night, I slept on the couch with my pillow and a throw blanket, while my sister got the master bedroom, because it was easier for her wheelchair. I kept all my college supplies locked in my car trunk and would sit in the parking lot of the grocery store to fill out my housing forms on my phone. Every morning my parents would ask when I was going to come to my senses about college. Dad said real family members don't abandon each other when medical bills are piling up and someone needs full-time care. Mom printed out articles about gap years and left them on the kitchen counter with parts highlighted about how taking time off helps students mature. They'd already told the neighbors I was staying home to help with my sister's care, and people kept stopping me to say how wonderful it was that I was putting family first. My sister would wheel herself into the living room whenever I was on the couch and practice her physical therapy exercises while talking about how much pain she was in. She'd drop things on purpose and then struggle to reach them, waiting to see if I'd help or just watch her suffer. When I didn't immediately jump up, she'd tell our parents I was being cruel to her on purpose. The next morning, I called the legal aid number my AP chemistry teacher had given me and made an appointment for that afternoon. The lawyer's office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax place, and she had stacks of papers covering every surface. When I walked in, she looked at my financial aid documents and started marking them with sticky notes, explaining that my parents could legally redirect my funds if I wasn't careful. Since I was still 17 for another month, she'd seen this happen dozens of times, where parents claimed their kids' education money for other expenses, and the students couldn't do anything about it. We spent 2 hours filling out forms to protect my scholarships and federal aid, and she had me sign papers that would kick in the day I turned 18. She also gave me a folder with copies of everything and told me to keep it somewhere my parents couldn't find it. So I hid it under the spare tire in my trunk. When I got home, my sister was doing her physical therapy exercises, with the therapist actually lifting her legs and moving them in circles while the therapist counted reps. The therapist kept saying how much progress she was making and how her muscle response was better than expected for someone with her injury. But the second the therapist packed up her equipment and left, my sister's legs went completely dead weight and she started crying that she couldn't move them at all. Mom rushed over asking what was wrong, and my sister said the exercises were too hard to do alone and she needed someone to help move her legs for her. First watched from the doorway as she let her legs flop uselessly, even though I'd just seen her lifting them 5 minutes earlier. The next day, I offered to help with her exercises since Mom kept saying we all needed to pitch in for her recovery. I sat next to her wheelchair and reached for her leg to help with the stretches the therapist had shown us, but the instant I touched her ankle, she went completely limp and started screaming. Mom came running from the kitchen and found my sister crying that I was trying to hurt her, that I was being too rough and aggressive with her injured legs. I hadn't even started the exercise yet, just placed my hand on her ankle. But Mom shoved me away and told me I was jealous of the attention my sister was getting. She said I couldn't stand that. My sister needed help and I was trying to make her recovery harder on purpose. My sister kept sobbing about how I'd